welcome to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him at gods5minutes@gmail.com. Now, here's Ed Wilson with God's 5 Minutes.
Hello, friends. We live in a world that's turning more and more away from the God of the Bible with its old stories of Jesus and the cross, Daniel in the lion's den, Jonah and the whale. Christians who display their faith are apt to be met today with scorn and ridicule, sometimes even prison, violence. Maybe it will be a consolation to realize that we are not the first. The first 3 verses of the 3rd Psalm, which is a psalm David wrote when he was forced to run for his life from his son Absalom, read, "Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Many are they that rise up against me. Many there be which say of my soul, there is no help for him in God. But thou, O Lord, art a shield for me, my glory, and the lifter up of mine head." David had suffered bitterly for his sin with Bathsheba and Uriah. God had ushered him into his years of fleeing from vindictive Saul. God used him to qualify David for his role as Israel's greatest king. But that tribulation was in the past and should never have needed to be repeated if David had been faithful to what he knew was right. Now, due to his failure, his whole nation, even many of his formerly faithful administrators, were saying that God was no longer with him and it was time for a new king. The cruel force of the tide of public opinion sweeping over him caused him to write the painful phrases in this psalm as he faced the desolation of being once again nearly all alone with enemies hunting his soul. Maybe we aren't in such a case. Maybe we don't have the testimony that we have brought our sorrows on our own heads. Or maybe, to some extent, we do. Either way, we need a rock higher than we are to deliver us. Certainly Christians in today's world can say, as so many of our spiritual forebears have had to do before us, "Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Many are they that rise up against me." When trouble comes over the news and believers try to offer comfort by saying our thoughts and prayers are with you, immediately comes the unbeliever's countercry, "What good are those things done? Keep your thoughts and prayers to yourself." Many are ready to say to us today, there is no help for them in God. It is bitter for those who do so, our jeering enemies, but it is worse when our friends join the chorus with the cry that God has abandoned us. At the time David wrote this song, he could not have known how things would turn out, but the sweet psalmist of Israel seems to me as notable as any man in the Bible for his courageous determination to maintain his faith in his God in all circumstances. The glorious teaching of the first 2 verses of the 3rd Psalm is that trouble drove David to God in prayer and not away from God in disbelief. When disaster threatens and everything has gone wrong, the worst possible response is to fall into self-pitying resentment and start giving up our faith in God. Of course our hearts plummet when the news is all bad. It seems our prayers are not answered. Those who don't love the Lord seem to have the upper hand. There are going to be times like that in life, and none of them keep God from being God. If we are faithful, our reward at life's end remains the same. When life got hard for David, when things looked hopeless and he had not a comforting friend to cheer him, his response was always to pray and cast himself on the mercies of God. And did this formula succeed? The answer is Absalom failed. The kingdom was restored to David, and he died peacefully in his own bed, surrounded by those who loved him. The 3rd verse of the psalm shows the triumphant rest of David's spirit. "Thou, O Lord, art a shield for me." The word translated shield actually means much more than something the old soldiers carried. It means a protection that surrounds above, below, on all sides, without and within. David had done what we used to call praying through, and the consolation of the Spirit gave him assurance that it was well with his soul. And so it was. And by the way, have you talked to God today?
You have been listening to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him by email at godsfiveminutes@gmail.com. Tune in next time to hear more encouraging thoughts from God's Word on God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson.